All right. Hello and welcome back. This is Colin Keeley here.
And I'm Brent Sanders.
And we're two guys buying and building wonderful internet companies, and it's been quite a while.
Yeah, it's probably been months since we recorded our last podcast, and not really a function of, I guess we've been busy, but just haven't been prioritizing it, right? Like just falling off. And I'm the worst at this. You're way better at staying on top of recording and doing stuff and marketing, and I'm like fucking heads down. Just let's do the work and let that speak for itself. But nobody knows about it if you don't talk about it. So here we are again. This was supposed to be our before the end of the year. Just kind of frame it. This was supposed to be like the end of year podcast. It's February 14th, Valentine's Day, that we're recording this. So it literally took that long to get. And I think I rescheduled this only 3 or 4 times. So
I think we had it planned for like December 14th. We're like, we'll do this before Christmas, before everyone's gone, and just did not do it.
Nope.
But yeah, it's partially for I moved like a year and a half ago. I basically have not had consistent internet in my office area this whole time. And so we figured it out with an electrician last week. So now I have very fast internet in my office and we can actually podcast.
Okay. So you can edit this out, but it's working really well. Like there's no choppiness. I can see you. The words are matching your mouth. It's like we're in the year 2020 again.
Oh, it's been so painful. Even podcasts or whatever, you don't have to do them, but like meetings, you kind of have to do.
Yeah.
And it was just as bad in meetings. So anyway, I'm all good now. So I'm back.
So on this pod, I think we want to catch everybody up. What have we been up to? What we got done over the last year, wins, losses, learnings, all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot to cover, but I don't think we want to talk about every little thing. Let's talk about some highlights. Let's talk about some wins to begin with. You got one to start with, like a win over the last year, your big achievement?
Let me see. Biggest achievement. So I did my learnings this morning of like South. So I rebranded Jules to South, my recruiting company. And I had like probably 5 learnings that I wrote through. We could talk through them if that's interesting. Because that went from basically an idea with like a few customers last year to like, we have a solid 15-person team now. And I've mostly removed myself from the business. So that was a 12-month process. Happy to talk about learnings there.
I mean, recruiting's not interesting, but starting a recruiting business is interesting. Yeah, I'd love to hear about it. I think like the one thing that I would love to hear about is like, and I know some of this, so I'm going to ask questions I kind of know the answer to, but our listeners might be interested. The leverage piece of it is always interesting. You're really good at achieving leverage quickly. And I'm much more of like, I don't trust as much, I think. And I guess when I look at how it's scaled and how you've gone over it, and we check in on it. This isn't like a business I work on. It's something but I ask about it a lot. I'm always like, oh, how's that going? It's hard to see how a business can scale when you aren't like the overly involved leader. Like, how has that been to be like, here's the SOP, here's the process, go forth and do? Because in my mind, I feel like you're giving people the process, the SOP. Why don't they just go do it themselves? Why would they even include you? And that always seems like the risk. Not that I'm like paranoid that someone's going to steal my business, my ideas, but if they start making good money and then realize you're taking a good chunk of that or some of it, like how you keep that in line. So that's kind of my big question, is like how that's gone.
We actually it's funny, as some of our early employees left, a brother and sister, and started a competing company. So I wish them well. I don't really care. But that did happen. It's an interesting leverage because I'm not a recruiter. So there's like never a point where I did the core business. So basically hired part-time recruiters. As it slowly took off the ground, we hired more and more full-time recruiters. And I basically, in the early stages, acted as like the marketing machine, where just my personal audience and friends and stuff like that, those were the initial customers. And then once it gets stood up and you have like social proof and everything, it kind of is off to the races. But then like, there's all the different portions of the business. And my new approach is basically like, I'm going to hire, if I had this goal to do in the next 6 months, like, why can't I do it in the next week? And just hire like a super smart, hardworking Argentine for like $1,500 a month. And their one job is to focus on like this one piece of the business. So that's kind of how I'm approaching it now. And it took me probably 12 months to get to this point, but like now every portion of the business has a good person kind of dedicated to it. And anytime I have to do anything, it's like, there's a flaw somewhere here. How do I get this off my plate and get onto someone else's plate as quickly as possible?
So what do you do with all your free time?
The answer is I haven't had free time because it's still like it's a constant work in progress and things are still falling to me. But
Sure.
it's getting better for sure.
Yeah. That's
Uh,
cool. Yeah. I mean, so like in talking about that ups, downs, the one thing I would say about the business that is impressive is it's very easy to, I don't know, I'm always in conversations where somebody talks about, do you know anybody who is hiring in in South America? And so it is very top of mind. And I'm always giving referrals. I don't know if you're getting them, but like, it's just everyone's kind of looking for this kind of help with, especially with, and we'll talk about this. Obviously, we're doing a year in review. We're going to talk about AI, but in terms of making people sort of force multipliers, like that's a killer combination now. If you're looking for a chief of staff or accounting, development, whatever it is, everyone's getting more powerful because they have better tools at their disposal.
for sure. Yeah. We keep talking about my kind of learnings there, but any wins that you want to talk through on 2024?
My biggest win, 2024, put a sauna in the house. That was like
Oh, man.
my big heck yeah. So that one I had to save up a lot of money for, but you know, it's been a total like lifestyle change. So I had one a long time ago in when I lived in Chicago before we had kids and sold the place. And you know, obviously that goes with it.
On the rooftop, right?
On the rooftop. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a fourth floor condo building on Southport in Chicago. And yeah, we had to say it was brand new construction. I was able to like kind of slot that in as like, hey, can you guys put this thing in there? And this was a lot harder to get done because it's actually in the house and getting it delivered and then put together and all that stuff. But it was a process. And now I live like a king. I wake up, I flick it on, 45 minutes later, I'm in there for like 30 minutes and I walk out feeling like $1 million. My energy's through the roof. I feel really good. And it's a good outlet. So I've actually coupled that with variety, which has been weird. I don't know how many months it's been. It's been a bunch of months, but yeah, it's like I've replaced some kind of unhealthy habits of like come home, have a beer or two or three with, hey, I'm going to go hop in the sauna 15, 20 minutes. And it kind of gets that. It's just like a replacement of a habit. And so it's been good to kind of get my skin's nice and soft. But yeah, that's actually not work related, but that actually has impacted all the aspects of my life. Sleep's better, all sorts of things. But I've always been a schwitzer, so to speak.
What's your protocol? How often are you doing it now?
Yeah. All right. So here it is. Weekdays, it's crank it to get it to about 190, it's about as hot as it goes, 190, 200. Get in there, lay down for 7 minutes and then another 7 minutes. So total about 15 minutes. And then get out and do a cold shower and then, you know, stop sweating for a while, shave, all that kind of stuff, go to work.
So right before bed, you do it?
No, first thing in the morning. And then, yes, I'll do it right before bed, but not cranked up like that because I don't want to be like sweating in bed. Actually, like crank it to a much lower temp, do bath time with the kids. The kids will come in, they'll do their loads. My son's got really dry skin, so he's got a lisp. Which is the funniest thing. So I call it the schwitz, and so he'll call it the spitz. The spit. Can we get in the spit? So it's adorable, but he'll get in there, and it's not very hot, but it's warm, and so they like getting in after the tub. They're not crying about that, and they do their lotion, and now they're old enough they kind of do it themselves. So it's actually a nice like quality time. My whole family gets in. It's not a big space either. It's 4 feet by 8 feet, but we all kind of climb in there and hang out and wind down, and it kind of gets them in a good mode for bedtime, which is cool. Living a very Swedish or like Norwegian life right now. Yeah. So that's my one big win for last year and it's continuing to be a big win. But really on the work side of things, it's just finding really good leverage. I think when I say leverage, it's a little bit less hands off. It's more so like, I think we're really hitting a stride with our team on Scout in terms of support. Testing has been a huge problem in the past that our support team has taken over, and they're internal. So one down in Argentina, one out in the Philippines, and they're just super strong, like in terms of reliability, process, like getting that really dialed. And again, I'm not the most organized leader when it comes to leveraging, but that has really nailed. And then also our developer that's been kind of dedicated to Scout. He's also gaining leverage of his own. So I'm really happy with the way things have been going and the ability to kind of move product changes and improvements and help us get to a better place. It's still slow and steady, but really happy with, like, I guess the year before and the year before that, like the amount of incidents, server issues, headaches, like that's all gone down to zero, and customers are happier. We're we're growing not at the clip that I'd like, but I am confident that because of the changes that we're making, we're going to be able to unlock a lot of growth. And by the nature of what we're doing, it's going to have to be slow and steady versus accelerating with a bunch of people at one time. But I'm really happy with the way all that stuff's gone, and the overall balance, like just lifestyle balance of like cash flow and workload and family. It's like that's been a real challenge over my son's 5 now, and that's been like a 5-year journey to kind of get to a point where I'm like comfortable. And maybe it's a function of their age, but like all the things, work, family, fitness, like everything's clicking where it feels not like everything's a battle, or like, how am I going to do all this stuff and how is it all going to work out? And existential dread of running a small business. I mean, as it's every day is a new crisis, and having the people around you to support you is everything.
Yeah, it feels like everything's reached stability, which is nice. Nothing's going to die. And the recurring revenue is in a good spot. And now it's just like keep making small improvements, compounding, and over time that delivers returns. Not super sexy for sure, but that's kind of the state of things across all the businesses at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, these are still their old businesses in the sense of their code, of their systems. And when they reached us, fairly unstable, fairly questionable, and they've definitely been put on a healthier path. But yeah, as you say, it's not that like hockey stick curve upwards. It is definitely like we're converting one customer at a time in many cases, but I'm not doing it necessarily, right? Like before it was like, okay, I'll get on the call with these people, or the prior owner, they were in that position. So if you look at like, and I always think about this, especially with Scout, like when we took it over from the prior owner, like he just struggled with getting that leverage, right? And so I feel like not only have we have attained that leverage, but now we're able to kind of think a little bit more strategically about it. And I think that puts us in a better position to grow it.
Yeah. I mean, with South, I did probably the first 30 customer calls and I hate it. I find meetings to be so disruptive to my life. Like I can't focus on other things during the day. Even if it's only like 1 or 2 in a day, it's like really knocks me out. But yeah, at this point, no one's asking like for my time, like demanding to get on my calendar, because it's like I'm not the face of anything at this point.
Yeah.
Scout is in a similar spot where they aren't taking meetings with us directly as often or very much at all at this point.
Yeah.
It's so nice to see work getting done when it's not you doing the work at this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's it. I mean, we've seen just like a total drop off of angry customers, which was like, that was day one. We just had like loads of people that were unhappy with the situation or whatever was going on, and they were promised things, and to see a lot of that stuff get smoothed out. I'm really excited to see, stuff we haven't released yet that's in the design phase that is, I think, going to unlock a ton of growth, which is just being a totally mobile application. Right now, everything's kind of split, and we've really like doubled down on where the customers are now. I think we're, suffice to say, I'm optimistic about the growth trajectory. It's just patience has always been a problem for me. And I think that's part of it, is like just being a little bit patient and knowing that, hey, I'm just used to things being like really quick and let's slam it out and get it done. And it's like that just with some of these businesses, it's really hard to do. It's like you have to just be prepared for things to take months.
Yeah. I guess along those lines is like, we're empowering some of the team. I ran into this at South, and it's like, I want the incentives to be aligned. And it's something I've struggled with, of like base salary versus commission. So initially I was definitely probably too low on base salary and way too high in commission. And one thing I realized is a lot of these international or global employees care a lot about having the stability of a US job, and they don't care as much about the potential to make like way more money.
Right.
So going too high in commission and too low on base is like just not what their desires are. So we, massaging that kind of incentives across the team of what people actually want and what they actually care about.
Cool. Yeah, that's good. All right. Well, those are some wins. Let's talk losses. Let's talk lessons learned. You got any? It sounds like a little bit with South, at least like some bumps along the road, but anything from the last year that you can share in terms of learnings?
Another kind of big one is like kind of cheaping out on talent. My default is to hire young, smart people and either coach them or like let them just figure it out. And I think we got burned by losing some like managers and just replacing them with people that were on the team that were young and smart instead of looking outside and hiring someone that's done it before. So we eventually hired like a recruiting manager that comes from a larger company. And it's like you just saved years of learnings by bringing someone over that's already done it before. And like,
Yeah.
you don't have to reinvent everything. It's just like, oh yeah, this is how the standard best practices are. So that was a huge win and like something that's obvious in hindsight that I should have just done earlier. Yeah. Other losses, like we didn't do any deals in the last year. We had a couple, I think, really interesting ones that just didn't pan out. I've looked at tons of venture orphans and either they didn't work for us for one reason or another. They're too small. It's like a fairly common one is like the revenue wasn't meaningful enough to save them, or they're big and like super hairy with a bunch of venture debt. And then I've just been kicking it to some other like larger private equity funds that I'm friends with to be like, you untangle this. Best of luck.
Yeah.
You need like $10 million in 2 weeks to get this done. What's people have and we don't. But yeah, any losses on your end?
I'm short on these. I mean, learnings is one thing. Losses, I mean, the deals is probably the one we haven't continued to do additional deals, but I think that it doesn't feel like a loss in the sense of like, you don't want to force something, right? I think we've had opportunities come up in the last year that like maybe could have worked, maybe could have been big opportunities, but also would just tons of brain damage. So I don't know. It hasn't been for the lack of effort and work and like work being channeled in other ways. I would say earnings, it has been not expecting too much out of people. And I think I'm getting old and I've run businesses for a long time. Is like, no one's going to be as invested as you are as the owner, right? It's like incentives can be helpful, but still like, and so I think biggest learning is just like accepting that to an extent and like understanding what people's output should be in a normal role. Like, what do you expect a part-time developer? What do you expect a contract developer in the code sense of the world, like the engineering side of things? It's like breaking things up more. And I think that rather than giving people big projects and expecting them to like shine, it's like actually setting them up on easy stuff first and giving people less off the cuff, right? Off the jump, and then letting them kind of get into bigger stuff and working gradually. And again, patience has been the biggest learning. And it always is every year as I look back. I was like, I really expected XYZ feature to be done in 3 months and it's ended up taking 6, 9, or 12, right? It's like, that is still continue to be across the B2B SaaS world. It's like people are using the product, they're running their business on it. They want new features, but they don't want to be disrupted. And that is constantly, that's been my biggest learning and my biggest like continual thing that we roll out is like, we roll new things out, but we do it gradually for 1 or 2, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 customers at a time before we blast it out to everybody, which is, I think, served us well. But yeah, I mean, I think that's just been more around patience, just continuing to be patient and understanding of like, okay, what do you actually expect somebody to come in and do when you're, again, trying to find leverage in a really small organization?
My, I guess, other loss of sorts is definitely a lack of producing content, which to me is really like a proxy for learning. I felt like I got bogged down in like hiring and like getting this other company off the ground. And then this internet issue, which isn't an excuse for not writing, but it's definitely an excuse for not podcasting. So I want to get back to that more. I'm trying to get back into that habit. Definitely fell off of the writing habit of like, ideally the first hour of a workday, instead of jumping into Slack, jumping into email, it's like set it aside, get some deep work done, and then go deal with the fires of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. We're missing the operating manuals, right? Those were gold. And now it's funny. Now I see other people on LinkedIn kind of regurgitating them, which is kind of a normal thing. It's like, you see really similar content, other people, but at the end of the day, I mean, it should be a function of what you're learning, as you said, right? It's like you generate these side effects from the things you're reading. I've been spending so much of my time reading, frankly, like not spirituality stuff, but in a sense, like spirituality of work, spirituality, like mindset around what am I doing every day? And as I get older, I just turned 43, having an impact and still producing things, but not losing the forest for the trees, which is, again, that's that striving for balance. I feel like I've attained to an extent, but maybe it just takes 30 minutes in a sauna to meditate and feel good about yourself. As you're in cold weather, you're not worried about freezing to death.
A little off topic, but you had this, I don't know if it's a health scare, but you did the function tests and you
Yeah.
had bad results. If you want to talk about it now, we kind of,
Yeah. Well, yeah, that was the
what'd you
one thing.
learn
So
there?
yeah. So I think I'm in great health, and I generally am. Like, so it kind of an endorsement for Function Health. If you've heard of it, you go and you do 2 blood tests, one, I think, a week apart, essentially. And I did it in like the height of just like eating poorly. It was over the holidays, just being a complete savage. And I did get a couple things back, mainly around like cholesterol, like the regular tests that you do of like what's your LDL and HDL count. Those were like slightly elevated. I'm like, oh, I moved to Cleveland. Everybody eats dips here. That's like the thing. It's unhealthy. You know, not walking as much. But they do some more stuff. They do this like fractionation of the cholesterol molecules essentially to measure them. And they actually raised like, hey, you have a lot of this small stuff. And so that has definitely been an interesting thing to
ApoB
really,
and LP little a are the two
yeah.
tests that aren't standard that you actually want to test for traditionally.
Yes. And so they did those, and those were like way off, right? So like the LDL and HDL numbers were like 1 or 2 points out of the normal range. And that has been good to change diet. So I have always been this, and I grew up this way of like, oh, if you work out, you can eat whatever you want. My dad was a super healthy guy. He was a marathoner, big cardio person, and always been in great health. And he would eat like a whole medium Lou Malnati's pizza on a Sunday by himself. Like he's just a savage, just totally eat. And he would always say, you can have whatever you want. You ran today or you did whatever. Not the case. You do need to have your diet kind of on point. And it's been 2 things that have tied. So one, just like not eating like an asshole. But then the thing that I found that would really trigger eating like an asshole is drinking, right? So just doing away with that. And it's the eating or the snacking and stuff like that. And I'm not like a big snacker. I'm not a sweets person. I'm generally like, it was, so I'm curious to see. I'm eating a lot of like canned fish. I eat sardines almost every day now. It's kind of gross, but I like it.
It looks
Sardines,
grosser than it is eating it. Like it's
yeah,
actually edible. It doesn't taste that bad, but yeah, it looks horrible.
it's delicious on a piece of toast. You mash it up and a little avocado in there. It's great. So it's kind of gamified it for me. It's not, I guess if you look at it, I brought it to my doctor and I was like, hey, I got these results and I'm not super healthy. And she's like, yeah, but like this, do you smoke? I'm like, no. And then she's like, okay, just like, I'm not worried about it, but if you are, like, you can go down the medication route. I'm like, I'm just going to try to eat like a human, like a good boy. The other thing is working out every day. So I usually work out 3 to 4 times a week. And so just mixing in the off days, just going to the gym and doing the elliptical for an hour or something like that, which is way harder than I thought, because it's like, oh man, you got a full day of work and then got to be home, got to take care of the kids. That has been a hard thing to get on, but I've been able to do it. And I'm curious to see how it all ends up, right? It's like, the fun thing about Function Health, you retest every couple months. So we'll see how the lifestyle changes impacted. But my sleep has been amazing, obviously. Like drinking is like the worst thing I feel like you can do to your sleep. So it's fun. I do miss it, but
Yeah.
it's, my wife doesn't drink. She hasn't drank for like 10 years. So it's a good environment to be in, where it's not like, oh, she's drinking it. It's really easy to have a glass of wine if your spouse is also pouring a glass of wine. It's super easy to cave, and she's been super supportive of it. So it's been good. Yeah. I mean, that has definitely been something I was surprised to see, because I have been getting blood tests from it. I go to yearly checkup. Everything's fine. And again, if you only measure the high level number, you don't look that bad. But if you look a layer in, there's actually like some stuff that you should be watching. And these are all like markers for cardiovascular risk. And I don't have a genetic disposition to it. That being said, so I was like shocked when I saw that, which definitely worth the value. I think it's $500, 400, something like that. It's a couple $100, and definitely worthwhile doing if you're thinking about it.
Yeah, I've heard they're doing really well. I think it's $500 a year, and you maybe get 2 batches of tests a year. But yeah, so I wrote about this. I had to look up what I wrote. I couldn't remember exactly. So I was just Googling ApoB, LP little a, and then my name. And Google immediately comes up with a great summary of what I wrote, which I didn't remember exactly what my numbers were. And it calls me a prominent figure in the field of cardiovascular health.
You are not a doctor. Not a doctor.
Little known fact, not a doctor. But yeah,
that's scary.
It is funny how AI would decide that. And so Peter Attia, like, basically punishes those numbers to like grind them to the level of a baby. So he'll give you atorvastatin, he'll give you other statins to like basically drop that down to like an infant level of cholesterol. Other people aren't as aggressive with that treatment. Like Brian Johnson doesn't go quite that low. So there's not like a well-defined perfect standard for that. You want them lower, but you don't know if you want them like insanely low or just outside the concerning range.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's this idea of, I don't want to say toxins, but what's like inflammatory stuff that, is inflammatory to you. And like, I just want to get it into a spot where it's normal, right? It's that whole don't die thing. Try not to die.
It's a good goal. What else do you want to talk about? You want to talk about AI? That's always the hot topic of everyone.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's so funny. And actually, the funniest thing that I've had happen to me recently is there are so many companies out there that have like, whether they're YC grads that have been around for a year or two, these businesses that have been out that are like just running on fumes. Like it's weird how many zombies are out there that are still kind of running, but you can tell it's such a hallmark when you see the CEO or founder like answering all the support messages. And I've had 3 companies in the last month that I've like tried their product out or I'm considering using something because I always want to like check out what I can buy before I have to build it. Multiple where they're like, yeah, we don't support that. But again, you're kind of odd why the founder is responding very slowly to support messages. And it does seem like because things are changing so fast, like products that last year might have been interesting that like now there's a model that does that, or there's a model that takes a PDF and turns it into structured data without any extra code or any extra work. And so that's been my latest insight is like, holy shit, there's going to be a ton of companies just falling off and likely venture checks that are going to zero, which is not anything new. Yeah. The world's just getting more and more interesting there. I mean, in terms of what I've been adopting, what our team's been adopting, and then integrating into our products and our projects it's just been great. Like we're just seeing so much value get unlocked out of not free, but close to free services because we use it at such a low scale.
Yeah, there's also, I don't know if you get this, but like monstrous amount of credits out there, like 100
Mm-hmm.
grand in credits to this one or that one. They're basically free to use at low scales. Yeah, so basically all the leading labs say they have a path towards AGI in the next like few years. So I think it's just going to get crazier because shortly after AGI is like super intelligence. My big thing is like not launching, I guess, AI companies, but I want to get to start trying to build these agents. So like, what does your first AI employee look like? So like we hire recruiters all the time. Like I think a lot of their job could be automated. So what would an AI first recruiter look like? I'm going to start noodling around with it. I don't know if, how reasonable it is yet, but as some other companies are doing flavors of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say I use it mostly still in the content space, not for actually writing, but like ideas around content. And then we have writers and they are able to publish way faster than ever before. Not
Yeah.
because AI is writing the articles, but like outlining an article is unbelievably fast nowadays. The other thing that I've noodled with is like have AI write hundreds of articles, get them all published. And if Google ever indexes it and then an actual human clicks it, and you could see it wasn't just an impression, like a human clicked it, have a human go through and rewrite that whole article to make it not AI slop and make it meaningful. And that's been actually pretty good for the companies. As in like, it takes time for Google to rank something, but once it ranks something, and you improve it, Google seems to appreciate that and rewards you for it.
That's cool. Yeah. Yeah. I know we're trying that on a couple of things. Yeah. The other thing, thing I'm excited about in a couple of days, I'm going and hopefully not getting eaten by an alligator, but I'm doing a backcountry kayak trip with the Outward Bound School, which I've never done like a formal course with them, which we'll see how it goes. It's in the Everglades, though. It's a kayak trip for a week and pumped for it. I didn't get my usual nature bath. I usually go on a trip every year with the same group of people and everyone's injured. So I decided to do it this way and see how it goes. But I'm pretty excited for that and curious to see how that shapes kind of future trips, future explorations.
So what's the rule? No phones for a week, or how's it going to work?
No, nothing. No phones. They're like, so I don't know if you know anything about Outward Bound, but my understanding is a lot of it is at its core, it's for like kids, right? It's like for troubled teens that are going to go and get scared straight or something like that. And it's coursework, right? It's like you're going to learn and do mountaineering for a month or whatever. And So a lot of the rigor around getting ready for it has been like, have your parents sign this thing, and I'm 43 years old and I have to sign my own permission slips. But yeah, they're pretty hardcore about, there's no drugs, no nothing, no, you have to, all your prescriptions, they have to kind of hold for you and make sure you're not like sneaking weird things in. No phones for sure. So I have like some disposable cameras, but I'm actually kind of pumped about. Like I haven't used one since the 90s. But yeah, that's kind of the thing. It's totally disconnected. And I've never done any camping in the South because of snakes and crocodiles. And I just don't, it just sounds so dangerous, right? There's like water moccasins and shit like that. But there's supposedly two guys that are going to be with us. And they say the worst bites you get are mosquito bites. So we'll see if this is our last podcast. We'll it'll tarnish their statement. I'm optimistic. I've done some kayak trips when I was a kid in Canada, and I love being on the water. It's like mesmerizing. It's great for the soul. So I'm hopeful that will recharge the batteries for the year to come.
What is it, like a trek? Like, do you do a big loop or something, or what's the
Yeah, we're
cover
gonna do a big
distance?
loop. So what I have gleaned so far, I don't have the exact course, but it's actually in the southwest corner. I fly into Fort Lauderdale, and then they bus us straight down south, and then it's called 10,000 Islands. It's a national park, and I believe they have a base camp you start at, and then you go out for 2-3 days, and then you work your way back for the remainder. You're spending the night on some beaches, but then also on some things called chickies that I learned about, which are basically like the platforms in the Intracoastal that are like wooden, and you climb up there and you put a camp up and you sleep. So like that part I'm very comfortable with. It's the animals. I'm used to like the Appalachian Trail, right? It's like, there's no bear. Well, I mean, there might be in some places, but put your food up. But usually there's enough people out there that there's not a lot of animals like that can eat or that usually do eat you. But here, this is a different story. There's a lot of alligators. But yeah, I'm really optimistic about it. I'm a little nervous about stepping away, but again, to the point of finding leverage, I'm comfortable enough leaving that I won't have my computer. I won't have my devices. I've got coverage. I'm able to do that, which as a tech leader, that's a big deal. That's a lot of trust I'm putting into the team. And I think it's a statement as to like, okay, where we've been able to get this stuff.
It's kind of a good like forcing function of sorts. Is like you should
Yeah.
disappear periodically, because then it
Yes.
forces you to delegate it to that extreme.
That's
But
exactly right. The bus factor cannot be won. So if I do get eaten, things will move forward, and people have access to the servers and databases, and I'm not the only one, which, to be honest, like that's when we find the businesses to buy. That's usually the case, is they feel like they can't leave because somebody has to stay on support and somebody has to stay on server maintenance. Somebody has to, what if the certificates expire? They don't have all that stuff in place. And so that feels good to have that stability and support.
well, sweet. Good luck. That sounds like fun. I'm going to Florida, but sounds like I'm gonna have a very different experience than you next week. So
Awesome.
okay, that's kind of all I got. Yeah, I guess take care, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.